and here we are finally ready to prune our bush rose. Now this particular specimen many of you will recognise. This is Estacia Vi from David Austin Roses, here growing in a pot. Now firstly, this particular rose is a little on the floppy side, which I love with this particular rose, but I have given it some support. So what I'm going to do firstly is I'm just going to remove this hazel support I have round the plant to enable us to have a little clearer access to the actual plant itself. It's quite cold here this morning, so that compost is a little bit hard. Now, one of the questions I'm being asked an awful lot with these rose pruning tutorials is when to prune. Now that's entirely down to yourself. A lot of you are feeling an awful lot of pressure that it's winter, you want to crack on, you want to get on with something out in the garden just as quickly as you can. Now often the easy answer to this particular question is the later that you leave it, anywhere from February through to the back end of March, it actually for the novice can be a little bit easier. The longer that you leave it and the more weather that passes, your plant will actually tell you what it wants to do. It will form buds in places where it wants to grow, and you can select the best buds that you want to keep. So don't please feel free that you need to rush out and get this task done immediately, especially if your roses are very, very young. If you're one of those people that have benefited over the last couple of years from my exclusive online discount codes from David Austin, and your plants are still under 3 years old, approach this task with caution over the next coming weeks. Here on the south coast of the UK, we've barely had any frost whatsoever. A couple of cold nights over the last couple of days, but nothing major. We could still have snow all the way through until March. So do approach with caution. If your rose bushes aren't particularly well established, leave them a little bit longer. Now, if your roses are really well established, you can crack on with this task whenever you like. Right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to approach the 3 Ds. Now obviously this particular specimen, as I said in the last little upload, doesn't have any dead, diseased or dying wood, but those are the bits that you want to look out for first. Remove any wood that looks like it is dead, diseased, dying, and then there is the C, the crossing. The idea of pruning your rose is to open up the shape, open up the center of the rose and create a round bowl or goblet shape to your particular plant, allowing lots of light, allowing a lot of air and airflow around the plant, hopefully avoiding many of the disease and pest problems that you may incur on a stressful summer. Right, this particular plant, again with the other videos and tutorials that I've made, you want to be looking out for the actual habit of the rose that you're pruning. Please remember, I want to install into you as much confidence as I can. Lots and lots of people will judge you, especially if you're like me and you're putting yourself out there online about what you're doing. Remember, they are your roses, it is your garden, you are the one learning, you are the one creating your own process. Create the process that is correct for yourself. Now, I am a professional gardener, and yes, I do know the rights and wrongs of doing things, but I also want my roses to perform in a particular way that I enjoy them. And that means as I age, especially, as I don't want my rose blooms to be right down at the floor. I want to encourage them to be a much more natural height for me to enjoy the flower, the blooms, and more importantly, where possible, especially with this rose, Estacia Vi, its scent. So if you want to leave your canes a little bit longer, do that. In a few years' time, if you've changed your mind and that's no longer suitable for you, you can change your pruning regime accordingly and adjust what you do. So please do have a little bit of confidence in the technique that you're doing. Don't be afraid to try it. If it's wrong and you get it wrong, well, the worst case scenario is you might put your plant back a season or two. It will catch up, even if you make a wrong cut. It's not terminal, so don't worry too much. The idea of pruning is to remove any excess growth and align flowering to where you want it to be. Also, as I said, to add light, air and circulation to the center of the plant to make sure there's plenty of air movement and there's plenty of air circulation there to keep it nice and healthy. You can see this rose is still blooming, or it has tried to bloom. There's some faded flowers here and actually a bud way down here. And what I'm going to do firstly is I'm going to go through and I'm going to remove the center of the plant. I'm just going to take my secateurs. I've taken the time this morning to clean these and give these a sharpen, and I'm just going to remove that central stem, and you can already see I can get my hand in here. I've got a nice round, clean, open bowl, and if I can, I'm actually just going to remove that stem there completely. It's not particularly easy to get into, and please excuse me if I struggle with this video, is because it is very, very difficult to do these things completely live. Really struggling to get into that one, but that one does need to come out completely. Not the best cut whatsoever, but you can see that stem, by removing that, has opened up the center of that plant beautifully, and now I can get my hand in here and I've got a nice clean and empty space. It is already difficult to do these things in one take, and I tend to do my videos all in one take, so this may be a little untidy. We now want to work on that crossing growth, and if you can see any crossing growth at all within the plant, that needs to be removed, and the only stem we've got causing us any problems is this one here, and I'm going to remove that completely cleanly out from the bottom like that and remove it. And I have seen, actually, now we started to work, a small amount of dieback forming here, so I'm going to remove that stem as well, just there, discarding the growth that we don't want. And then we're very, very simply going to go across the rows and reduce everything down to around 3 to 6 inches from last year's pruning. Now, if you wanted to leave that rose a little bit taller, please feel free to do that. Varieties like the Queen of Sweden and the Lark Ascending, I do tend to leave a little taller. I enjoy their height, I enjoy their drama, but this particular rose, as I say, is going to send up canes around 3 to 3.5 feet tall. So I'm going to want to reduce this right down to about 6 to 9 inches from where it came from, so those blooms are then at a comfortable height for me to enjoy them. And what I want to do is I want to go around this plant now and choose strong outwardly facing buds, and we do that so that center of the plant here, where I've just cleaned out, remains open and remains nice and free, so there's plenty of air flow going in there. So you can go around the plant now and you can simply remove any canes back to an outward facing bud. So starting with the ones you can see, and I say, if you leave this task towards the latter part of February and March, the buds are much easier to see. There's much more growth there, and you can go through that if you're not particularly experienced, and you can go through that much easier. Again, a nice clean cut with your secateurs. Remove any wood that you don't want. Remove it down to around 6 to 9 inches from where the growth came from. Again, selecting nice, strong, outward-facing buds. Now, if you have any problems in the garden with pests and diseases, and you are slightly concerned about the health of your roses, it is always best to clean your secateurs between plants. Now, this particular rose is nice and young, it is nice and vigorous. There are no health problems with this particular rose whatsoever. So I'm not going to clean my secateurs between this and the next one. But if you do have any problems in the garden with any pests and diseases, you want to be making sure that you're sanitizing these secateurs in between your prunings. Now, this particular one, what are we going to do with this one? It's always good to take a little bit of time, stand back and take a look at what you're dealing with. That one for me looks a little on the untidy side, so I'm going to take that back to there. A nice strong outward facing bud on that one, and I'm just going to shorten this one down here as well. Nice outward facing bud, and you can see that I'm left with a nice clean tidy plant. Lots of space in between the actual branches themselves. I have a crossing stem here which I've just noticed, but as this particular plant is quite upright for this particular season, I think I'm going to leave that well alone. You want to be making your cuts just above the bud, around 6, 7, 8 millimeters away, to allow just a little bit of dieback. But as the sap is now very much down and possibly on its way back up, you shouldn't end up with any seepage and any dieback into your roses. Once again, if you have any queries, you have any questions, you want to ask me anything at all, please feel free to leave me a comment and I will come straight back to you. But this is a task you can crack on within the garden now and over the next 6 to 8 weeks. And once the roses really start waking up in March and April, then is the best time to give them a really good feed. I've made my points of view on this very, very clear in the future. I give mine potash or fire ash and then mulch over them with a good 4 inches of organic compost. But we'll move on to that later on. If you have any queries, you know how to get hold of me.